Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Welcome our main speaker for tonight, Chick. My name's Chick Parnell. I'm an alcoholic pillhead. I'm also a wife beater and a child beater and a suicidal manic depressive and all of that clean and sober. I never did any of that when I was drinking and using. Sobriety was an untenable place for me. In fact, after I came to my first meeting September 10th of 1952 and stayed sober until December 22nd. I don't remember all the other times, but you see, sobriety must have been important to me way back then because I still remember the dates, you know. I decided that at 24 years of age, December 22nd, and then Christmas coming up, that when I get to be as old as all the rest of you guys, then maybe I'll hang it up, you know, but you all looked older than God to me at that time. And, well, and there weren't really very many. In 1952, there weren't very many people under 40 or 45, or so it seemed to me. Now, the sponsor I have now has 46 years or something like that, and he remembered me. He had come in the year before, a couple of years before that, whatever it was, and he was in his 20s. So there were young people, you know, but like we say around here, I guess you look for the similarities and not the differences, and I certainly found all the differences. So that was my first entry. There was a really lovely lady, a chanteuse by the name of Lillian Randell, who brought me to my first meet. Is that amusing? You find that amusing? I've got your name. Anyway, Lillian brought me to my first meeting, and then I saw her perhaps, well, I guess I should give you my actual sobriety date so that I won't keep wondering, if you're wondering, how long it took me to get sober, okay? I'm a compulsive thinker, you see. Anyway, it's January 15th, 1965 was the date of my last drink or pill or mind-altering substance. And I saw that lady in later years in my sobriety go down the tube, little by little by little, you know. And I'm sure it was behind pills. I'm sure it was behind pills. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous this last time, I was drinking about a quart of vodka a day, and I used to say a half case of beer because it sounded more important, bigger, but it's 12 cans is what that is, 12 cans of beer a day. And I had two doctors, each prescribing for me, Librium, Tuinol, Econol, and Sperrine, all downers. And I got 30 days worth of prescriptions from each of them, so I had 60 days worth of pills. And at the end of about 3 weeks, the pills would be gone, and I'd have to start increasing my intake of booze. And I want you to understand, that is not what it took for me to be loaded. That's what it took for me to be able to go to the dry cleaners, or the grocery store, or the gas station. That's what it took for me to look normal to the outside world, or so I thought. So, I mean, when I wanted to get loaded, I was a musician, and my idea of a great day off was to drink so much that I would pass out, and then come to and drink so much that I'd pass out, and then do it 3 times. If I do that 3 times in a 24-hour period, I had a great day off. That's the way I used to think. And I want to tell you, I had a lot of great days off. I used to work at a really nice place, the Tail of the Cock on La Cienega, and then I used to go up on my night off and sit in at the Bantam Cock up above Melrose, and I mean to send the other bass player home, you know, because I just I just wanted I wanted to groove, baby, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and grooving goddamn near killed me. Being hip, slick, and cool did that. It is funny too, you know, because I really did think I was hip, slick, and cool. I think I'd like to get this out right away, that I got my sobriety in what's now called the Pacific Group. Before it was called the Pacific Group. It was called Tuesday Night Ohio. And anyway, that's, so I had, Clancy was my sponsor for the first 9 years. And I'll do the part that leads up to that, I guess. I had some friends on the program, because I told you I came in 52. So between 52 and 1965, there were many ins and outs and ins and outs and ins and outs. And I finally, this last time when I came in was actually, I told you it's January 65, but it was February 64 that I came back and stayed sober for, I guess, until May. And I went out and had what I called one drink, which was a half pint of vodka and a can of beer. To me, that was a drink. And the way I figured that out with this keen alcoholic mind of mine was that at the tail of the cock, there were some drinks, not all of them, but some of them, were $1.25. They were those weird drinks that no self-respecting alcoholic would ever drink, you know, pink squirrels and, I mean, snow cones, that crap, you know, I don't, none of that stuff. Anyway, those were $1.25 back then. And so I therefore figured that the amount of booze that I could purchase for $1.25 equaled one drink. And at that time, I could go to Save On Drugstore, and for $1.25, I could get, for 99 cents, I could get a half pint of that rot gut Count Vasya vodka that was like kerosene in a match, that stuff, man. And a can of beer. And I'd drink about 4 ounces of it, of the vodka, and then chase it with beer and linger a little bit on the beer, and then polish off the rest, and then chase it with the beer. And that for me was a drink. So I came in February. In May, when I went out and had that one drink, it was during this time, between February and May, that I started going home late at night, which was normal for me. That would be like most workers going home at 6 or 7 in the evening, you know. And when I get home at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock, you know, because I worked anywhere until from midnight to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I wanted out, man. I just wanted out. In fact, I guess this is a good place for me to mention that the message that I carry in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, we say, if you want what we have, you know, and I'm pretty sure that before I'm finished speaking, they're going to be, the greater majority of you are going to realize that you really don't want what I have, you know. Because what I have, yeah, but there'll be 1 or 2 of you who'll bet your ass on what I have. Because what I have to share with you is I know how to walk through suicidal depression and stay clean and sober. The only antidepressants that I have used in 34 years are the 12 you heard mentioned in Chapter 5, and I think that's what they're for. And they, along with you guys, have saved my ass. So I came in February, I drank, but I started becoming suicidal, see? And I used to go home every night and grab the ice pick and hold it up against my chest. Now remember, my wife's already in bed, asleep. I come home and I go in the kitchen, grab the ice pick, hold it up against my chest. I'd say, God, if you won't give me the courage to live, for Christ's sake, give me the courage to die. And I'd stand there and I'd wait, nothing had happened. And I'd put the ice pick back, take a shower, and go to bed. And the next night I come back and do the same thing again. And then the next night I come back and do it. This thing got to be such a normal part of my daily routine that I actually could hold the ice pick up against my chest and ask God to help me to kill myself while I was thinking about what I was going to do tomorrow. Now, not too tightly wrapped when you start thinking that way. And it was along about shortly after that first slip, this time around, that a friend of mine suggested that I contact, in fact, it's a really fine actor, Dick Webb, and another buddy of his, Dale Russell. Both of those fellows have since passed on. They suggested that I go to the Suicide Prevention Center. So I called the Suicide Prevention Center, and the lady I spoke with said that this was on a Tuesday evening, and she said, tomorrow's my day off, but my house is set up to receive patients. If you'd like to see me, I'll see you at home. And I said, okay. And she was out in this area somewhere, in the Mar Vista area. And I didn't know how long it would take or what. And I had, at that time, it was really a very good paying job for a steady music job, because we had a cocktail shift, 5 to 7, and then 9:30 to 1:30. And so I dressed for work because I didn't know, and in those days a musician wore a suit and tie. Strange. Anyway, that's the way we dressed, and that's the way I arrived at this lady's house. I think I probably looked more like a Fuller Brush man than I did, a musician. I don't know. Anyway, that's the way we dressed, and that's the way I introduced myself. We went in, and this lady sat down at her desk and started talking to me, and it was a very short time before she reached behind her and pulled out a book and leafed through some pages. She said, I'll tell you what, I want to put you down. This was on Wednesday. She said, I'd like to put you down in my book for, I think she said Friday or a week from today or whatever it was. And I said, I'm not going to make it until then, And she said, well, and she closed the book, and she said, I'll tell you what, I will call Neuropsychiatric Institute at UCLA and ask them to admit you as an emergency case. And I said, okay. So I went up there, and I walked up to this gal. Now, at that time, the waiting room at Neuropsychiatric was about half the size of this room. It was a pretty large room. And I walked up to the counter, and probably some 19-year-old college student was behind the counter, cute little gal. And I said, and there were other people in there, I didn't want them to think I was a wacko, So I said, my name's Mr. Parnell, and the Suicide Prevention Center called about my coming over. In fact, what I did was, now remember, I was not, at that time, I wasn't a band leader, I was just a sideman. And I reached in, I pulled out my card, like I wanted, if you were sitting in that room somewhere, I wanted you to think, this must be some guy from the Menninger Clinic who's here to solve some really big problem they got here, And that's what I wanted it to look like, So she said, oh, yes, Mr. Parnell. Yes, we got would you please be seated? We'll get you. Okay, so I sat down. And I suppose I waited 30 to 35 minutes, and it seemed like an eternity to me. And I went back over to the counter, and I said, Miss, I'm Mr. Parnell, the fellow that was sent by the Suicide Prevention Center. And she said, oh, yes, Mr. Parnell. I said, I have been waiting here for what seems like an eternity. And if you don't get someone for me right away, I'm going to do it on your goddamn floor, And it got the desired results, let me tell you. They got someone right away. And again, this cute little nurse, I have no idea. I wonder if I'll ever see her again. So if you're out here, Miss Zinke, Z-I-N-K-E. It's a funny, I guess it's because of the last letter of the alphabet or something. I remembered the lady's name. But she took me into a little interview room, and she sat down at the desk, and all she did was ask me my name, and all the rivets popped out. Man, I just started to cry and come apart. And she said, Mr. Parnell, I think we can get you in a week from Thursday. And I said, I tell you, I think there's an unbridgeable gap in our thinking, here, you know. You're talking a week from Thursday, and I'm talking about I don't think I'm going to be around at sunrise tomorrow morning. And because I just wanted out. See, booze and drugs had proved to me, they didn't kick my ass. They were wonderful until they weren't wonderful. And there was no more relief in that stuff. My body could get loaded, but my mind couldn't get loaded. There was no more relief. That's it. And I was stuck with me, you know. So I asked, isn't there, I'll sleep on the floor. She said, the health department won't allow us to let you sleep on the floor. I said, the couch. She said, no, no. And I said, well, and I mean, she did the best she could. She did, I guess, you know, she gave me a telephone number that I could call anytime during the day in case I decided to do anything serious, you know, like get out the ice pick again, I guess, is what she was talking about. And I just kind of shrugged, you see. See, I'm coming up on my birthday pretty soon. So if I start to bawl up here, it's because I'm coming up on my birthday, and I always remember some of this stuff and make a point of it at birthday time. Dr. Bob said we should bury the wreckage of the past and not revisit the grave. And then he added two more words, too often, which implies that we should revisit the grave occasionally. And I try to do it every year somewhere around my birthday. And man, I had just hurt so much for so long. I don't know if any of you have had physical pain where it hurts so much that it doesn't hurt anymore. It gets numb. It gets numb. You know that sucker is hurting, but you can't even tell that it's hurting because it hurts so much. I mean, if that makes any sense to you. And that's the way I felt. That's the way I felt out there. That I just, God. And when the lady said that, it was right back to square one, which to me meant, what's the use? What's the use, man? She doesn't know. Nobody knows. And of course, I never believed that any of you in Alcoholics Anonymous knew. I never believed that. Until I finally got ready for Clancy. See, one of the reasons that Clancy is so successful with guys like me is because when you get so far down, there ain't no more down. You're ready for Clancy. That's it. You know, that's why Clancy's babies, the ones that are successful, don't argue with Clancy, because they've done all that. They've done all that. We've already done all those arguments before we get to this guy. And I still sponsor that same way. I say to somebody, look, man, I sponsor with two thoughts in mind. Number one, you wouldn't ask me to sponsor you if your way were working well. You wouldn't ask for help from me if your way was working. Number two, I won't screw you like you will screw you. Okay? That means that when push comes to shove, you do it my way rather than your way, based on the fact that I won't hurt you. You know, that's it. And if you're not ready to do that, then step aside and make room for the guy behind you, because that's what I know how to do. But if you're not willing to knuckle under to that, which I say the Pacific Group's the best AA boot camp there is. That's it. That's where you learn it. And that's why I'm really, truly glad that I'm one of the sick ones. You know, I always, whenever I say, which I do frequently, and I'm going to say it now, I am one of the sicker ones, and one of the sickest ones in Alcoholics Anonymous. And every time I say that, I look around the room to see if there's somebody going like this. But they're always going like this, you know. The ones who know me are always going like this, you know. But I'm glad. And I'll tell you why. Those of you who are here tonight, the way I was here during that first 12 and a half years thinking, God, isn't this wonderful for these folks? I mean, they're such lost souls, you know. Isn't this nice that they have this place, this camaraderie, and what they so desperately need, they're finding here. God bless you, you know. See, and if you're here with that attitude, I have some very distressing news for you. You're the sick one. Because those of us who hang around here telling you how sick we are and talking about our defects of character because we're trying to uncover them and discover them and discard them, we look sick to you. But we're not, because we're looking at ourselves and you're not able to do that yet. See? But that's where the words keep coming back, are, you know. Thank heaven that God sees to it we get the truth about ourselves in bite-sized chunks. Because if we got it all in the first few months, forget it. There'd be an empty room, I'll tell you that. Anyway, I'm getting away from my first year in the chronology here. So I stayed sober till May and went out, and then I came back and stayed sober until January. I always have to count back at 15, 14, 13, until the 12th of January of 1965. And that time I pulled out all the stops. And I don't remember that moment of clarity, you know, where, I mean, I was working at the tail of the cock, the guitar player. I was trying to learn Morse code. The guitar player had been in a signal corps. So I put on the earphones and he was sending with a telegraph key to me. And so he said he had to use the John. So I says, okay. Now he had a martini on the rocks and he set it up on the shelf in the hat check room. And when he got back, man, I had drunk the martini. And that was another time that I had been sober, you see, since last May here up until January. And I cannot tell you the look. Some of you have experienced this. I'm sure several of you will give me the nod on this one. Where someone who really likes you, you know, this guitar player and I were really good friends. And he knew that I had a terrible trouble with alcohol. And he knew that I knew. And he knew that I knew that he knew, you know. And he gave me one of those looks, one of those half-ass supportive looks, when he said, well, Chick, maybe you can handle it this time. No, we both knew that was bullshit, you know. But, you know, I said, well, maybe I can, but as long as, see, and the famous words of the Slipper are, as long as, you know, like you wake up with the shakes, man, and you're going to quit today. Pretty soon 2 hours goes by and you say, as long as I'm going to be coming apart by noon, why do I have to suffer now? I might as well, you know. And I've done that number so many times, you know. And so what I told this guy was, well, as long as I've had a drink tonight anyway, I'll meet you up at Dolly's Beer Tavern. That's where I did my serious drinking. You got to think, beer is serious drinking? Well, see, I kept my stash in the car, and what I would do, I was a smoker then, and I would walk into Dolly's, and we'd start playing shuffleboard, and just hail fellow, well met, and all that good stuff, and maybe if I'd sit down next to you, I'd run out of. Oh, before I'd walk into Dolly's, if I had a fresh pack of cigarettes, I'd take 17 of them out, so I'd walk in there with about 3 cigarettes, so that I'd run out, so that I'd have to go out to the car, so that I could reach under the seat and take a couple of good drags on my vodka jug, and then walk back in and look like I'm only drinking beer, you know. Now, if you had caught me out there drinking the vodka, I would have sworn to you I didn't come out here for that. I was out of cigarettes. I mean, the denial is just incredible. But then I'd walk back in. But Dolly, the lady who owned this joint, screwed me up a lot of the times because she'd find out what kind of cigarettes. I always smoked some weird kind of Rudy Tooty Fruities or something, you know, that nobody ever smoked, you know. Juleps, Hanovers, English Ovals, Dunhills. But whatever it was, she'd find out what they were, and she'd get the cigarette machine guy to put them in the machine. And then I had no reason to go out to the car, you know. So I'd have to switch to a different brand of cigarette. And that's what I would do. Another thing, if you invited me to your house because you were having a party, you stopped inviting me for a while until I realized that it was because I was drinking all your booze. So what I would do is I would go into your house and I would ask for a tall gin and tonic or vodka and tonic, you know. And then I'd start up a conversation. Maybe Luis is there, we're talking to each other, and I'm saying, you know, so on and so on and so on, and President Clinton said such and such. And Luis said, no, he didn't say that. He said this. Luis, I've got the United States News and World Report in the car. I'll go get it. Go out. come back in, and I'd say, you know what, Luis, you're right. You see, it didn't make any difference whether the other guy was right or wrong, because I got what I needed by going out to the car. That's why, if you're new to this thing, and we tell you, if you put half, maybe even only 10% of the effort into this program that you put into drinking and using, you got it made. See, because all of those little things, these little methods of conniving to be sure that I was where, let's see, if I don't have any, I got to have something to drink before breakfast, and then if I meet this guy, he doesn't drink, but that's okay, because I'm going to be with this guy at lunch, and he drinks. I mean, big time. Okay, well, that's fine. That'll carry me until the, I mean, all that stuff, man. That's why when alcoholics first get to Alcoholics Anonymous, the one thing we are is tired. Jesus, was I tired. I was 34 years old, was I? Yeah, 34 years old, going on 117 was the way I felt, you know. And I'm 71 years old now, and I look younger now than I did when, well, almost. Some of us like to revisit our hair. You know? Honest to God, it really was funny, because I did a movie with Doris Day when I was with the Page Cavanaugh Trio, and it's funny because Page sent me a copy of the video, and it's because I play bass, you can see me better than you can see him, you know, because the bass player stands up, and he's sitting down with his back to the camera, and of course Doris Day and Gene Nelson are facing this way, and I'm standing right next to him, you know, big as life, and I said, yeah, he said, it's a chance to revisit your hair, you know. I must tell you, I was really very lovely. I was a pretty good-looking kid. I did modeled for, well, modesty be damned. You know, I like what Frank Lloyd Wright said one time in the courtroom. Your name, please? Frank Lloyd Wright. Your occupation? I'm America's foremost architect. You know, I used to model for Desmond's, and it was kind of fun. You know, I mean, I would go to I was still in high school, and they gave me 50% off on every piece of clothing that I modeled, so no wonder I was voted the best dressed guy in school, you know. And I went to school up here, Uni High, until they kicked me out. And I got kicked out for being a musician and being away every Monday so I could play coast to coast on the Hoagie Carmichael radio show. And I mean, I had a fantastic life during that, but that, I digress. That goes back to where my first drinks were, you know, around 13 or 14. But anyway, now I have forgotten where I was, and I'm pretending it doesn't bother me at all. But I'll find out where I was, and if I don't, it ain't no big deal. One of the lines that my friend over here said that he heard me say when I was out here a couple of months ago was that if you're new, I guess the words are, if you're ready. I said, if you're ready, we can't say anything wrong, and if you're not ready, we can't say anything right. And what I said was that I could stand up here and talk about my tomato plants for 40 minutes. And if you're ready, you'll come up to me after I'm finished and tell me, God, that was such an inspirational talk, you know, when really all I did was just pull something out of the Burpee Seed catalog, you know. That was supposed to be hysterically funny, and it didn't work out at all. Never fails, man. Every time I try to be funny up here, I fall flat on my ass, you know. And every time I'm pouring my heart out, you guys are just chuckling to beat hell. You know. Well, let's get to Clancy. I finally went from February to May, May to January, and January. Now, by this time, this suicide business is getting pretty serious. My friend said to me, you want to be careful, chick, because one of these, it was Dale Russell said, one of these days, you won't be careful what you pray for, because you may get it. And I remember one night I grabbed the ice pick and I held it up against my chest. I said, God, if you won't give me the courage to live for Christ's sake, give me the courage to die. And I was sort of ho-hum about it, you know, at this time. But I had said this, and I felt this tremendous flow of strength come into this arm, and I dropped the damn thing. You could get killed doing that. And I was pretty sure that with my luck, I'd hit the vital spot, bam, be out like a light, you know. If I could have been certain that I would have banged up against the wall with only one wall away from my sweet little Al-Anon wife, you know, that she would have come running into the kitchen. I could have slithered down to the floor saying, "God damn it, Judy, now look what you've done." You know, I could have gone for that, you know. But I was afraid they'd just find me and sweep me out with the garbage the next day, you know. And I guess I've always been that way, and I'm still that way in sobriety, you know. I'd like to be anything except mediocre. Anything except average. You know, my new thing in Alcoholics Anonymous is taking group inventories. I'm very good at that, you know. People who put their feet on the chair, you know. I mean, there's something to me about a person who puts his foot on the chair. He doesn't deserve to be sober. Now, that's truth. That's the truth, I'm telling you. You're not supposed to know that or hear that, because I'm sure you won't understand that. And by the silence, I can tell none of you do, you know. Now I really am in trouble, okay. I'm arrogant, I'm conceited, I'm highly opinionated. I've never run out of opinions. Some of them are pretty good and some of them stink, you know, but that's me, that's me. The day that I called Clancy, I got to the tail of the cock. He wasn't supposed to be home. See, this is how this thing kind of starts to work. But he was home. And I told him that I had been up to Neuropsychiatric Institute and that I had been refused because they didn't have any room. And he said, well, his first words to me were, "Suicidal thoughts are a natural result of over-introspection. You've been looking inside too long, and it's killing you." Okay? Pretty heavy-duty statement. And then he asked me where I was. I told him I'm at work. He said, "Are you able to work?" I said, "Yeah, because I'm in a high-class restaurant. We're not supposed, the musicians aren't supposed to speak to each other or to the patrons. I mean, unless they ask for a song or something like that." I said, "It's the intermissions that are getting to me, because if somebody comes up to me and says hello, I don't know whether I'm going to break down and cry or hit him in the mouth." That's where I'm at. Those two extremes. And he said, "Okay, let me tell you, don't feel too bad about not being admitted to UCLA, because Dr. So-and-so," and he named the guy who was the head guy at Neuropsychiatric. He said, this was then June 16th. He said that this Dr. So-and-so, his wife, blew her brains out in April with a 38. So he said, I guess they're looking for some answers too. And really, he didn't know this, but my hidden agenda was, I'll go to Clancy until the people at Neuropsychiatric Institute could give me the real answers. See, that's the way I thought. Well, he pulled that rug out from under me right away when he said the doctor's wife blew her head off. I thought, oh, Christ, that ain't going to work too well, you know. So what happened was this. The man said, "Chick, you don't have any problems anymore." He said, "I'm going to take them all. I'm going to take all your problems. All you got to do is go back and play that goddamn bass until your next intermission. When is it?" I said, "It's at 6 o'clock. He said, "I'll be by the phone. Call me at 6. I called him at 6. "When's your next intermission?" It's at 6:30. I called him at 6:30. "When's your next intermission?" It's at 7. At 7, he told me. Now, see, this is how we were talking about a Rosemary that we both know, who's now back in Boston. She couldn't, this is after I was about 8 or 9 years sober. She was working at Lockheed, and she was absolutely petrified one afternoon. She was seated at her desk and couldn't move. She was so screwed up. And I said, "Rosemary, can you get to your car?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Where's the nearest 7-Eleven?" She said, "It's about 2 blocks from the parking lot." I said, "Go there and call me." See, I mean, I was doing with her the same thing that he had told me to do. And I talked this lady home from one 7-Eleven to the next until, or a Ralph's or whatever it was, a payphone, till we got her home. And that's what we do here, you know. I think the most wonderful thing anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous has ever said to me was one time in the car when my ass was falling off. I was suicidal again. I just wanted out. And Clancy Clancy and I were in the car together, and he just reached over and he grabbed my shoulder and squeezed it real hard. And he says, you know, Chick, sometimes this is all we have for each other. He didn't try to shove a step down my throat or tell me, go home and write about it. You know, or, I mean, he just held my shoulder and said, sometimes this is all we have for each other. And I don't think we talked for a while, but we communicated, and it was okay. Because when I first started with him, I remember calling him one morning, seated on the edge of my bed. This usually gets laughs, and it's not intended to. I mean this very seriously. I was sick. I had a pair of pants on each side of me, and I was immobilized by the decision of which pair of pants. I couldn't get out of the bedroom because I could not decide which pair of pants I was going to wear. I called Clancy. And instead of laughing at me, Clancy said, describe the pants for me. And I said, well, the one pair's a pretty good pair, and the other pair is more like a pair of Levi's. He said, well, is there any are you going to the noon meeting out at the Nest? I said, yeah. He said, well, then put on the good pair and fix yourself some breakfast, and then call me back. That's what he said. That was the beginning of what years later have become the two most important words in my sobriety. One is ASK, which stands for Ass Saving Kit, okay? And the other one is GOD, which stands for Good Orderly Direction. The trick is, and this was what I'm so grateful, why I'm so grateful to be so sick. Before I do the ASK, you know, of dialing, I have to be committed to accepting the GOD. Whether it's what I like or don't like or not, doesn't make any difference, whatever it is. You know, there are many times after that Clancy used to give me pretty strong direction, and sometimes he'd come down on me so hard that he'd follow it with almost like an apology and try to explain why, and I'd tell him, don't bother. Don't bother, because everything you've told me to do works. Everything I've told me to do doesn't work. I don't need the explanation, just the direction. And I would do it. And I did that for 9 years, and then we had a falling out, which was good for both of us, I'm sure. Since then, Jules Pilcher has been my sponsor, who is just a wonderful guy, you know. I want to be that kind of an AA member. I called him up and I said, you know, Clancy and I had a falling out on Tuesday night. Said, I heard about it. And I said, I called him at his office. And I said, I'm scared, Jules. This is a red flare call. He said, I'm going to close the office and be wherever you want me to be in 20 minutes. That's the kind of AA member I want to be. See? And I'm almost afraid to say something like this because for so many years, I have had a real difficult time thinking well of myself. But I got to tell you, I am pretty much that kind of person now. I'd love to tell you I have never turned down an AA request, and it'd be bullshit. You know, I had a friend of mine, Bob Kaplan, called me up for I had just gotten into bed, and he called me to go on a 12-step call. I said, Jesus, Bob, I just got into bed. He said, that's all right, to get somebody else. What I wanted to explain what trauma I was going through, and he didn't want to hear it. He just wants somebody to go. And I called him the next day and I said, Bob, I don't care if you have a 12-step call to go on in East Jesus at 4 a.m., call me. I don't ever want to do that again. Not ever. And there was one other time when a little junkie called me from Pasadena that I had been working with, and he called me just a little bit after 2, which, you know, that's the time they usually call. And he needed a ride home back to Fairfax and Melrose, you know. And I said, Jesus, Frankie, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. He says, I'm helping you to stay sober. I said, help me to stay sober after 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, will you? And I hung up. Now, my sponsor, Clancy, at that time, was out of town, so I called Don Gates. And I told him what had happened, and he laughed. He thought it was hysterically funny. I said, Don, I feel terrible today. He said, well, I mean, who are you to learn any differently than the rest of us here in Alcoholics Anonymous? You're going to learn eventually that it's going to be easier to get out of bed, get dressed, and drive your ass to Pasadena and pick up this ingrate and bring him all the way home than it is to justify not going. It's just easier. This, for those of you who don't realize it, this is the easier, softer way. This is it, man. And my life now is at a point where, you know, when people say, how are things going? I say, nobody has a right to feel this good. Nobody has a right to feel this good. I'm in the flow. I am in the flow. And I mean, I talked with a long distance operator this morning or yesterday morning, whatever it was. Well, I do this, you know, and I told her, she said, you sound really, really good. I said, I'm fantastic. I'm 34 years clean and sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, I feel so good, I want to do it all over everybody, you know. And she thought that was wonderful, and we talked a little further, and I laid some God stuff on her, and, you know, I don't know whether I brightened her day. She brightened hell out of mine, you know. Because I think it was Clancy that said one time his grandfather told him, if you can brag without lying, go ahead and brag, you know. So I'm at the point now where my wife, who I held a butcher knife up against that lady's back, and I said, you sign that goddamn government refund check or I'll run you through. And I would love to tell you that when I saw the knife start to push in on her skin, that oh my God, it frightened me. It didn't at all. It turned me on. I wanted to go the rest of the way. When my son was practicing the piano, I used to make him practice without any undershorts on, so that I could whip his ass with the belt whenever he made a mistake. Now that's the kind of sickness that I brought to you guys to work with. It was on my 13th Alcoholics Anonymous birthday that I asked my wife to give me my cake. And I said at that meeting, I said, I haven't struck my wife in over 1 year. Now that's at 13. Took a long time at my house. That may not be a big deal to you. It's a big deal at where I live, I'll tell you. My wife has forgiven me. My son has forgiven me. There are moments when I forgive myself, but not too many. And some of you will probably come up to me afterward and say, don't you realize that by not forgiving yourself, you are playing God? Fuck you. You get 35 years, then come tell me. Okay? You know, because I believe the 7-step prayer, where it says, those things which stand in the way of my usefulness to you, please remove those things. Well, I do still feel guilt about this, and it's okay for me to feel guilt, because if there's some guy in this meeting who's feeling that same kind of guilt and thinking he can't get sober or stay sober, you're full of shit. You can be guilty as hell and still stay clean and sober. See, that's why I don't want the kind of higher power that a lot of you have. I don't want a personal God. When I get home tonight, I will not walk in the door, kneel, and before the light switch, I'll say, now, electricity, I pray that you light the room when I throw the switch so I don't fall on my ass getting across to the dining room. Electricity doesn't care. And that's the kind of God that I have to have. I have to have a God. See, if I believe that I can change God by praying, then he ain't any kind of God that I want. My God has got to be the same, what is it? There is a line in the Bible or something where it's first, last, and always, or whatever it is. It means unchangeable, unchangeable from the beginning. I say that anything that God ever has done, is doing, or ever will do, is done. Because I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about God in 2 words. God is. And that's it, man. Anything else you add is gingerbread. That's it. Now, this power, which makes the H-bomb look like striking a match. I mean, the power is just incredible. And that's what's happening to me. And that's what I was trying to tell this little long-distance operator. I said, I've got this new kind of carrier, and you're telling me the way it turns out is this. I made a mistake in the way I asked for the service to be changed, but it's worked out to be in my favor. Now, if you're working your program the way I am, I got to tell you, you get to rely on that. Pretty soon, you can hardly wait to make the next mistake to find out what a terrific solution it's going to be. Honest to God. When I go out with my wife and she wants to see some terrible goddamn 3-hour iceberg movie like Dr. Zhivago, you know, where I'm like this for 3 hours watching this soap opera, and I say to her, because I've learned how to stay married 42 years, and here it is in 2 words, yes, dear. Now the amazing thing is, because Clancy used to tell, I said, Clancy, he said to me when I first started with him, any discussion of your marriage is off limits for 5 years. And that was it. That was the only thing I wanted from Clancy for my 5th AA birthday was the right to divorce that rotten bitch. Okay? And it was sometime after my 5th birthday. I'm driving down the street one day and I thought, you know, I am still married because I want to be married instead of because he said I have to stay married. And it was wonderful, you know. And this is now what's happening in my marriage. My wife had 2 strokes back to back a year ago last April. And she was a legal secretary and a damn good one. You know, she took dictation the old-fashioned way. Her right hand won't work. And she slurs her words sometimes. And when she first came home from the hospital, we cried, we wept about it, you know. But now we laugh about it. And while she was in the hospital, I went to her the second day that she was there. I said, the neurologist says, it's not a brain tumor. You're not going to die, but I'm going to talk to you as if you're going to die. Because I don't want to get home and find out that you have passed away and that there were things that I wish to Christ I had said to you, Judy. So I'm going to tell you. And I told her how much I loved her, how much it meant to me. The first night I saw this gal, I asked the head cocktail waitress, I said, who's the blonde with the glasses at the piano bar? She said, I don't know why. I said, because that's the kind of girl I want to marry. I hadn't even spoken to her yet. 3 weeks later we were engaged, 3 months later we were married, and then here it is 42 years later, you know. The love that we have for each other is absolutely incredible, but she's not able to do the things she used to do, and I told her, I said, Judy, I just heard this on the radio, which is the truth, about 6 months ago, 8 months, maybe a year. Women need to be cherished. Men need to be needed. So you're doing me a favor. It's just like Alcoholics Anonymous. I light up like a Christmas tree when I start working with a new guy who needs to ladle off some of the experience that I've gotten. Man, it's overflowing. I mean, here's the ladle. Take as much as you want, because my higher power say, oh, the level's down there, gives him some fresh stuff, you know, because that's the way it's working for me. My son is HIV positive, and when we found that out, he left home because we were having fistfights, and that brought us together like a family like this. We are so close now. There's so much love in our house. It's absolutely incredible. And I tell you, my life, God, if there's anybody in this place, I hope you're picking up some of not only my sincerity, but my enthusiasm. I guess as they say, that comes from the word God within, entheos. That, I mean, there's the things that are happening in my life just are marvelous. I have no way to say it except to just say thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here. remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.